Greetings and salutations. Welcome to another episode of Coffee, the Bible, and Page, where you will witness me thinking with my mouth open. Well, to start off with, as I always do, I believe in the beginning God created coffee. And lo, it was very good. All right, today we're continuing on with the Beatitudes. We're going to be looking at verse 6 of chapter 5. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. After poverty of spirit, verse 3, mourning over our sin, verse 4, and the study of meekness, verse 5, Jesus describes the next stage of the believer's journey, a deep, ongoing hunger for righteousness. Now, these Beatitudes are all linked together. It's like a ladder we're climbing. So now we're at the point where we are supposed to hunger and thirst for righteousness. So let's get right into it, see what kind of ponderings I'm going to come up with here. First of all, the verbs hunger and thirst, I'm not even going to try to pronounce them in Greek. I've learned my lesson. They're in the present tense, the present participles, which that expresses a continuous longing, never ending. There's not an end to it. So blessed are those who are always hungering. Blessed are those who are always thirsting, continuing to hunger, continuing to thirst. Now, this isn't a passing feeling or an occasional desire. It's a picture of a soul that is continually craving the things of God. And just as our bodies cannot go long without food and water, the soul cannot thrive without God's righteousness. To hunger and thirst for righteousness means to yearn for God's approval, His ways, His likeness. It's not self-righteousness, it's not moral pride, but it's a passionate pursuit of God's character, seeking to have that character formed within us. The truly blessed person is one whose heart aches for holiness, justice, and a right relationship with the Lord. Now, if I were totally honest, I think I shall be. I would confess that apart from the first few years after my conversion, and the last 3 or 4 years, thirsting for righteousness was not a thing for me. After much pondering, I've come to my own conclusion that this hungering and thirsting after righteousness is acquired and is something that must be maintained. Allow me to explain. When I was about 12 years old, before I go any further, this is a crass example, but I think it applies here. I'll leave that up to you to judge. When I was about 12 years old, I started smoking cigarettes. I really have no idea why. It was possibly the stupidest thing I've ever done. In the beginning, every time I would light up, I would hack and cough and almost throw up as I inhaled that poison. But for some stupid reason, I kept at it. Eventually, I stopped hacking and coughing. It wasn't long before I actually found myself looking forward to my next cigarette. It soon became a very real addiction. The principle underlying what became a full-fledged addiction for me was repeated activity. Unnatural at first. It soon became an embedded habit, and soon it was something that I could not live without. So let's get back to this hungering and thirsting after righteousness thing. How can we cultivate this? How can we cultivate this in our lives? To get to the point where, according to the Greek words used here, we're continually thirsting and hungering after righteousness, like I did for my next cigarette when I was a young teenager. As crass an example as how I arrived at my cigarette addiction is, it somehow seems appropriate here. How do we develop this hungering and thirsting lifestyle? Well, I believe the answer is found in Matthew chapter 22. When Jesus says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. That's the first and great commandment, and the second one is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You see, when I fell in love with my wife, we began a journey of discovery that continues to this day. Initially, we wrote letters frequently. That was back when people wrote letters. I read her letters over and over again. When we were together, I looked for opportunities to serve her, anything I could do to elicit a smile. I spent time with her, and we could talk the whole night through about anything. Loving God's a lot like that. Talking with God, prayer, reading his letters to us, the Bible, and constantly seeking things that please him. Loving your neighbor becomes the outflow of this. All of this is the natural expression of one who is loving God and in right relationship with him. So what is a practical approach to getting ourselves to the point where we have this holy addiction to the pursuit of a right relationship, which righteousness is right standing? How do we get to this holy addiction of a right relationship with God? Well, I've seen this play out in my life. In 2020, I was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. This, accompanied by the COVID-19 pandemic, found my doctors having me be homebound with no outside trips. I was homebound for about 2 years, using an abundance of caution, as no one really knew the full dangers of COVID-19, especially coupled with the fact that I had congestive heart failure. Now, during this time, it wasn't long before I became bored out of my skull, as I could not do in-person guitar lessons, which was my vocation. I had to transition to doing online lessons. In order to do this, I had to learn some new technology involving cameras, microphones, computer apps, the works. I probably spent a year to 18 months finding the right microphone and finding the right apps that would allow me to do what I needed to do. I decided the best way to do this was to start a simple little podcast, which would involve everything I needed to know, and it would be a daily activity that would really force me to become comfortable with all this technology and these different apps I was going to be using. As a result, I began Coffee, the Bible, and Page. Now, initially, I would simply read a passage of Scripture and do what I call thinking with my mouth open, where I would speak extemporaneously on the passage under consideration. I would get up every morning around 6 a.m., as that was the quietest time of the day, and I would spend 30 minutes to an hour recording and posting my podcast onto various platforms such as Spotify and YouTube. It wasn't long before I would go to bed at night thinking about what I was going to read and speak about in the next day's podcast. It wasn't too long after that I began doing just a bit of research the night before a podcast, taking a few notes, just something to refer to during the filming of that next day's podcast. And at the beginning of this year, 2025, I decided to go in complete Bible study mode and attack the book of Revelation, verse by verse. I set up my days to study and write throughout the week and then produce the finished material as my weekly podcast every Monday. From January to October of 2025, I went through the entire book of Revelation. I'm now at the point where I can't wait to get up, sometimes as early as 4:30 a.m. to study the Bible. My day isn't complete unless I do this. Now, as I write this, right now, it's 2 a.m. I went to bed early. I woke up and was wide awake. So I got up. I'm writing this study that you're hearing right now. Sounds a bit like an addiction, doesn't it? Do you see the process? In the beginning, getting up early and reading the Bible wasn't a natural thing. I had to set the alarm clock, stumble to the kitchen for a cup of coffee, and stare with bleary eyes at the scriptures as I read them aloud and commented on them. And as you have read here, now I wake up in the middle of the night. Sometimes I will almost bounce out of the bed because I can't wait to sit at my computer and write the thoughts that are racing through my skull concerning what I'm studying that week. As a result of this, the quality of my life is changing. I'm finding myself seeing the sin in my life more clearly, and it grieves me. I am more and more aware of my moral failures and my inability to measure up to what I'm reading in the Word. I find myself desperately pursuing God's ways of dealing with situations in my marriage and my friendships, every aspect of my life. I'm hungering, thirsting after the righteousness of God, hungering, thirsting after right living, right standing, however you want to say it. The Beatitudes are coming to life in me. I'm seeing my life transform into a living, breathing commentary on the Beatitudes. Well, then comes a promise. They shall be filled. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, for they will be filled. They shall be filled. The verb for filled is future passive, meaning they will be filled or satisfied. The passive form reveals that it's God that's doing the filling. This isn't something we do. We don't fill up our lives. God does. What we cannot achieve by our own effort, God supplies by grace. What we're talking about here is the pursuit of righteousness, or hungering and thirsting after righteousness. We're talking about putting ourselves in a position to receive what God has to offer. We can't produce this. We need God. And we're talking about the things we're going to have to do to put ourselves in a position to be filled by Him. Now, when the Bible talks about righteousness, it's talking about being in right standing with God. This pursuit of righteousness is all about the pursuit of a relationship with God. All right, perhaps this is a poor example, but what comes to mind is a gentleman whom I follow on YouTube. He rescues dogs, and I'm a dog person, so I always watch this guy's videos. He rescues dogs who have been abandoned or mistreated. Time and again, I see him enter a shelter and go into the enclosure where an abused dog is cowering in the corner. The dog has no reason to trust a human and is fearful to the point that it won't make eye contact with this gentleman who has come to rescue it. Over a period of time, through this man's continuing efforts and kindness and gentleness towards this dog, I see the dog slowly let down its guard. And when it reaches a point where it realizes that this human will not harm it, it will inevitably physically lean into that human, sometimes licking his hand or even his face. Sometimes it will even climb up into his lap and lay down contentedly. That dog has moved from a place of rejection and fear to a place of contentment. It feels protected. It feels, possibly for the first time ever, love. I can't help it. My eyes get watery every time I see that process take place. I can't escape the sense that that's kind of a picture of me. I want to know that I'm valued by God. I want to know that I'm safe with God. I want to know that He loves me. I want to be in a place of right standing with Him so that I can know it with my mind and my heart that He loves me. And according to this verse, if I pursue righteousness, right standing, if I hunger and thirst after it, God says I can have that assurance. There's a book, Practicing the Presence of God. It was written by a Brother Lawrence, who was a 17th century Carmelite lay brother who lived in France. And this work captures Brother Lawrence's simple yet profound approach to spirituality, learning to remain continually aware of God's presence in everyday life, no matter how ordinary or menial a task. Brother Lawrence discovered something extraordinary, that God could be as near to him at the sink as in the sanctuary. His great secret was simply this: to live every moment as if standing in the presence of a loving Father. He didn't separate life into holy and ordinary. Washing dishes, mending sandals, stirring soup, each task became an act of worship when done with God and for God. The time of business, he said, does not, with me, differ from the time of prayer. His approach was wonderfully simple. He trained his heart to turn towards God throughout the day, a quiet thought, a whispered thank you, a brief glance heavenward. When his mind wandered, he didn't scold himself. He simply came back to God in love, like a child returning to a parent's side. The goal wasn't perfection, but presence. Not rigid discipline, but devotion. Brother Lawrence learned that the presence of God is not something we achieve. It's something we acknowledge. God's already there. We simply learn to notice Him. Let me say that again. We simply learn to notice Him. What a beautiful picture of what it means to lean into God, to live in continual pursuit of righteousness, seeking to notice him moment by moment throughout the day. And God promises that those who do will be filled. We'll find true satisfaction, moving beyond merely knowing in our minds that he loves us, to actually experiencing and feeling his love more deeply and personally with each passing day. Another example of this can be drawn from my marriage. Both my wife and I had a difficult childhood. She lost her father when she was in kindergarten. Her mother was not in the picture, and she was raised by a stepmother who married several times during the time that Glenda was in her home. Between her stepfathers and an abusive boyfriend, she learned to be distrustful of men. Men hurt her. When we met in high school, I was a senior. She was a sophomore. I fell in love with her right away. She was amazing. She still is. It took her a while to realize that I was not like those other men in her life. I was committed to loving her. And once she realized my heart towards her, she was all in. We have now been married for almost 50 years. I cannot imagine my life without her. I can't imagine my life with anyone else but her. To this day, I have not quit working on getting to know her better. We're in a new season of life now, with different circumstances, different needs. I want nothing more than to accommodate her every need. I want to bless her. So, I continue to pursue a right relationship with her. I make adjustments. I find something that pleases her. I take note of it. This has been an ongoing process for us in our nearly 50 years of marriage. It's no wonder that Paul uses marriage as a visual example of the relationship between God and his church. Now, having said all that, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but it has occurred to me that this hunger and thirsting after righteousness should be the norm rather than the exception. This should not be something that we slip in and out of like I have done over the years. Dear God, please forgive me for ignoring this. So, the pursuit of righteousness, this pursuit of this hungering and thirsting after righteousness, is a pursuit of a relationship, continually leaning into God until his presence becomes our deepest satisfaction. Hungering and thirsting for righteousness should not be rare, but it should be normal for every believer. A lifelong, love-driven pursuit of intimacy with God that he himself promises to fulfill. It's a good place to stop. I would like to take this moment to put in a pitch. If you go to, you'll see a link after the end of this video here for my Patreon site. And in the Patreon site, you can support me for $5 a month. And with that, you'll get free access to my podcast notes, my script, if you will. And there's study questions that come at the end of each one of these Bible studies. There's 15 to 20 questions that'll help you put this stuff to work for yourself in your own life. Or if you don't want to become a member, that's fine. You can purchase each set of notes for $3. So if that's something that interests you, follow the link at the end of this broadcast and join me over in my Patreon site. All right, having said that, here's my coffee. I am out of here. God's blessings. Bye-bye.
You can purchase these transcripts at patreon.com/coffeebible page.